Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to learn how to jump down from one-way platforms, and we're also going to work on moving platforms. And there's going to be some pretty wacky antics that go down with that, so let's get right to it so we can have some fun. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is that I remade the level. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, and you don't have to make it look like mine, but I wanted to remake it in a way that will be more friendly to the different platforms we'll be making in this video. I also changed the jump power on the player. After some testing, I found that 8.5 works pretty well with the platforms that I've been testing. And the last thing I want to do is I actually want to go into the player camera here. And I want to go into position smoothing, which is off by default. I'm going to turn it on. After some testing, I found that 8 pixels per second worked pretty well for this player speed and everything, so we'll go with that value. We're going to be doing a lot of jumping and moving around in this video, so I wanted to make sure that it was a smoother experience. And I think this feels pretty good. The jump feels a little bit better, the camera isn't snapping into place so quickly, and I think this is a great jumping off point for the rest of the video. Okay, the next thing we're going to work on is we want to make it so that the player can jump down from one-way platforms. Currently, if we test it out, we can jump through them, we can jump up through the platforms, but we can't jump back down from them, we have to fall off of them. This was requested by someone in the comments, and I totally agree that we should implement this. So the first thing we're going to do to fix this is we're going to go into the tile map, and we're going to open up the tile set. And here we're going to go to physics layers, and we're actually going to add another physics layer to the tile map. Okay, so now we have 2 physics layers. And I had mentioned before that we would come back to the collision layers and the masks, and this is that time. So first of all, we're going to click on the 3 little dots here, and we're going to edit the layer names. By putting in names, we'll be able to keep better track of what's what. I'm going to call layer 1 player. And just because of the way that they're broken up in Godot in these sets of 8, I'm going to skip down to layer 9, and I'm going to call layer 9 ground. And layer 10 will be one-way ground. And those are all the layers we're going to do for now, but we'll definitely add more layers later as we need them. So now if we look at the physics layers in the tile map, we're going to say the collision layer for these is going to be, one of them is going to be ground. We'll remove player from that. This is not the player, this is the ground. And it's going to be masking for the player, so that's correct. The other physics layer is going to be on layer one-way ground, and it will also be masking for the player. So now we've got 2 sets of physics for the tile map. The next thing we want to do is we want to go down to tile set. And now what we need to do is we need to move the physics from one of these tiles over to the other layer. So we're going to go into the paint tab, and we're going to go into physics layer 0. Now this is the ground layer. So this is all the solid ground, but currently we still have our one-way ground on here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of these, and I'm just going to clear them. So now they have no physics on them. And now we're going to go into physics layer 1. And this is our one-way collision layer. And we're going to remake this collider just like we did before. And we are going to apply it to all of these. Oh, but I forgot to turn on one way. Got to make sure that's on. So now we're going to apply that. And that should be working. Let's see, let's just click on a random tile. Yeah, so everything's one way and the collider looks right. So now these are on 2 different layers. This should still function the same. If we play, we'll save and then play. Oh, well, we forgot to change the collision layers on the player, so we need to go into there. So we'll go into the player scene here, and we go into the collision under collision object 2D, and we are fine with the layer because we made layer 1 the player, so that's fine. But here we want to change the mask. We don't need the player masking for itself right now, and we do need it to mask for the ground and the one-way ground. And let's go ahead and save. Hopping back into area, and if we hit play, Now we've got the result we want, and it works exactly as it did before. It's just that now we've got some organized physics layers to work with. Next, we're going to hop over to the player scene and we want to open up the player controller script. And we're going to make some changes here. The first change we're going to make is we're going to add the function input. It's underscore input, and it takes in an event. This is an alternative to using physics process for input, although for some things, physics process works better. For example, when I'm using the input keys to get the direction of the player that I want to move in, I like to do that in physics process because that's being handled every physics frame. But when you're doing things like jumping or certain other inputs, I think it works better putting it into the input function. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to move jump. We're just going to cut and paste this into here. There we go. And we actually are going to change this because instead of looking at what inputs are being pressed, we're going to look at what the event is and then check if that event matches. So this line right here, we're going to change to event dot is action pressed jump. And is action pressed is a really nice method to know. It returns true if the action is being pressed. That means that it works for holding the button too. And the rest of that can stay the same, and that should work just as before. We can actually save and try it. Yep, just like before, it works just fine. Next, we're going to add another input check, but first we need a new input. So we need to go into Project and Project Settings, and we're going to add a new input into the input map here. We're going to add Move Down. And I'm going to make this S. You can make it whatever you want. And now we're going to do a similar if statement here. We're going to say if the event is action pressed, move down. And we'll add some functionality to this in a second. And if it's not being held down, we'll have a different functionality. Again, we'll add that in a second. Now we're going to call this handle jump down. Okay, and to get through the one-way platforms, what we're going to do is we're going to use the layers that we created, the physics layers. Now there's a lot of ways you can do this, but this is the way that I chose. And the way you do that is we basically want to set the collision mask of the player, not the layer, but the mask. The player will stay on layer 1, but we want its mask value to change. Now, if you don't remember, you can check what mask value you're trying to change by just clicking on the player, and we can see it's got 2 masks turned on. Mask 10 is the one-way ground. You can actually, if you hover over it, it tells you the name of it. So we want to change the value of mask 10, and we want to make it false when the player presses the move down key. And what we'll do is when the player is not pressing the move down key, we'll turn this back on. So this will just turn this mask off when the player is pressing move down and back on when the player releases the key. Let's go ahead and save this and let's try it out. So if I go up here, I press S, I go down. But if I do it here on the solid ground, which is in layer 9, I'm not touching that, so even if I hold down S, even if I tap it really quickly, nothing happens. Alright, so now that we've got jumping down covered, let's move on to moving platforms. Now I've already gone ahead and imported a new sprite here. This is platform 1 large. You can see it over here. Just a very simple sprite for a platform that we're going to use for both stationary and moving. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a new scene. So let's click on this button right here to add a new scene. And this is going to be the moving platform scene. And we're going to use a node 2D. And we're actually, I don't know how quick it'll be to find here. There it is, path 2D. You can always search up here. We're going to use a path 2D because we're going to create our moving platforms based on paths. A path 2D will let us create waypoints that then we can get an object to just follow along. So now we'll just click create. Okay, now that we have this scene set up, we're actually going to add a few more nodes. But first, let's go ahead and save it. Let me just rename this to Moving Platform Large. Just in case we want to have a smaller one later. I do have another sprite, but I didn't import it just now. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. And we're going to save it under the Scenes folder. That's good. Now we're going to add quite a few more nodes. We're going to need a path follow 2D. We're going to need a remote transform 2D. And don't worry, I'll explain these in a minute. And we're going to need an animatable body 2D. This one right here. Two more things. Collision. And last but not least, a sprite. So to go through these, the path, that's where we're going to be drawing our path for the platform to follow. It's going to be how we define what movement we want the platform to have. Now for the path follow 2D, we can actually click on this button up here. This will pull up the documentation for the object. And it says, this node takes an apparent path 2D, which we have, and returns the coordinates of a point within it, given the distance from the first vertex. So this will help whatever its children are follow the path set up by the path 2D. Now the remote transform 2D, we look at the documentation for that, it pushes its own transform 2D to another node 2D. It can be set to update another node's position, rotation, and scale. So you can see we're getting an error here. And that's because it needs to point to a valid 2D node. So if we click on it, we've got the remote path here. We need to assign it. And we're actually going to assign it to the animatable body 2D because that's the node we're going to want to move. Basically the thing that has the collision shape and the sprite. Now you might think you should be able to just make this animatable body 2D a child of the path follow 2D. And I did try that, but I was getting some kind of weird results. I don't know if it's a bug in Godot or what, but it just wasn't updating the collision. But it works fine if you do it this way. So we're just going to go with this. Okay, now the animatable body 2D is a really cool node. It is basically a node that you can move around, and its linear and angular velocity are estimated and used to affect other physics bodies in its path. It specifically says that it's useful for moving platforms, doors, and other moving objects, so that's great. I actually didn't know about this node until recently, but it's really great, very easy to work with. And now what we need to do is set up a collision shape. So we're getting that warning right there. Now let's go back into the visuals here. And before we set up a collision shape, let's actually set up the sprite so that we know how big to make it. So we'll go into the sprite texture, do a quick load of our platform. And there it is. Let's just zoom in a little so we can actually see it. Perfect. Let's see. So back into collision shape. We're going to go with a rectangle 2D. And we just got to resize this to about there. Now, I generally like to have my collision shapes in front of my sprites so that I can see them better. You can always make them invisible, so I'm just going to reorder that. And yeah, if I need to see the sprite, I can just click on the eye and make it invisible there. Back into the collision, we do want to make this a one-way collision. Now, if you want your moving platforms to not be one-way platforms, you can totally do that. Shouldn't be any differences with following along the tutorial. So I'm just going to change this to be one-way. And you get a nice little arrow to show you that it's a one-way platform now. Now we just need to tweak a few of these variables. We're going to go into the animatable body here, and we need to check that the collisions are set up right. So the animatable body itself needs to be on the one-way ground layer, and it needs to mask for the player, which it already is. So perfect. And we also need to go into the path follow 2D, and we want to turn off rotate, because otherwise when it's following a path, it'll rotate along the path, which, depending on your game, you may want. We're going to turn that off, otherwise it's going to knock our player off of the platform. And I'm going to save. Okay, now let me show you how the path system is going to work. So if we go to the path 2D up here, we want to click on curve 2D and points, and we want to add some elements. We'll add a point right there, and we'll add another element, and let's just move this point to -10y, There it is. And you can just kind of drag it. So like right now, the idea would be that the platform would follow this path up to that point. And one thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to resource here and we're going to make this local to scene. What this will do is that if we instantiate multiple of these platforms on the level, each one will have its own independent curve 2D resource. Otherwise, they would all have the same curve. So now if we go to the path follow 2D, we've got progress and progress ratio. We're going to use the ratio because that goes from 0 to 1, which I think just is more intuitive. And you can actually see how this is going to work. We're basically going to be manipulating the progress ratio value and changing the position of the platform. So the next thing we want to do is we want to attach a script to this platform so that we can actually move it around via code. So we'll go up here to the moving platform large and we'll say add a new script. I'm actually going to rename this script to remove the large part there. We'll just call it moving platform and I want to save it in the scripts folder. There we go. It inherits from path 2D, which is fine. We'll hit create and I'm going to give it a class name in case we want to find it later. We'll call it moving platform. Save. And what we'll do is we're going to use tweens in order to move the platform around. So the first thing we'll do is run the ready function. And we'll set up another function here. We'll call it the move tween. And when the scene is ready, it'll call move tween right at the beginning. So now we'll set up a tween inside this function. And we need to call the tree, or get tree rather, and then create tween. And we're going to do set loops because we want the tween to run a particular number of times. In this case, we're going to leave it blank because that will set up infinite loops. So the tween will just go back and forth. If you only wanted the tween to run twice or 3 times or something like that, you would put in a number here. And now we got to change the tween properties. So the property, if you remember, that we're actually trying to access is the progress ratio right here. You can actually see the property name right there. It's progress underscore ratio. And we can copy the property path and we can paste it. And it's just exactly what we need to access. Now doing it that way is nice because that way you're not going to misspell it or something. So we're going to say tween.tween property. And we need to access the path follow 2D. So actually we need a variable up here. We'll do @export var path follow 2D. And this will be of type path follow 2D. So now we can access this object because the tween has a few parameters here. Let's click on it. So for tweening properties, it takes in an object. This is the object that you're trying to access. This is the property that you're trying to access on that object. And then it's got a final value, the value that you're kind of going for, and how long it'll take. So let's go back. So we're trying to access the path follow 2D and we're trying to access the property progress ratio, which we copied and pasted there. It's a string reference, which is why we copied and pasted it. The final value we want is 1.0. It's going to start at 0 and it's going to go to 1, as we saw in the progress ratio. And the time we want, we'll do 1 for now. And now, if I run this, we'll actually see that the platform will go up and it won't come back down. So let's try it out. Let's go back to the Area 1 scene. And let's go back to 2D view here. And let's bring in a platform. And there it is. Let's move it over here, maybe. Well, let's move it over here so we can actually see it as soon as the game starts. And we'll hit play. And it's not working because I just realized we forgot to plug in the path follow 2D in here. There we go. So now if we save, it should work. Going back, let's see, there it goes. So it goes up, doesn't come back down. That's okay. That's exactly the behavior we expected. It's not the behavior we wanted, but the behavior we expected. So let's keep working on that. So back into the script. Now what we want is we want a second tween. I'm just going to copy and paste this to make it a little bit easier. And this second tween is going to go from whatever this final value was, which happens to be 1.0. We're going to go back down to 0. It's going to take 1 second. Same property, same object. And tweens play sequentially. So it'll play this tween, and then when it's done, it'll play this one. And then when it's done with this one, it should loop infinitely. So it'll go back to this one, and then back to this one, and it'll just keep looping between them. So let's try this now. And there we go. We got a moving platform. We can actually step on it, and it already works. And it should work with the falling through. Yep. And because it's one way, we can jump right up and then come back down. So really cool stuff. That's already working. So let's move on to the next step. Okay, so back in the moving platform script, there's a couple of things that we can do here to make things a little bit nicer, a little bit easier. First, I'm going to do a couple more export variables. We'll do an export variable called path time. We'll initiate it as 1.0, and we're going to use this in place of this so that we can actually tweak it from the inspector. We're also going to do a couple more tween related variables here. We'll do an ease variable, and it's of type tween.easeType. And we'll do another one here called transition. And it'll be of type tween.transitionType. And I forgot to put var right here. There we go. Okay. Now what we can do with these is if we go into here, we can actually append set ease right here. And then you can pick what kind of ease you want to set for the tween. But rather than picking one and hard coding it in, we're just going to pass in this that we can, again, pick from the inspector. And the same thing with transition. We set trans right here. And again, instead of hard coding one in, we're just going to put this one in here. And since I don't mind having the same stuff on both tweens, we're just going to copy and paste that right there. So now what we can do is if we go back to the moving platform here, just refresh that inspector. Let me make this small for now. We've got path time, we've got ease in and translinear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on ease in out. And for the transition, I'm going to put it on trans quad. And what we can do is save. I'm also going to change this to be, let's change it to something really quick, like maybe like 0.4. So it'll be quite a bit faster. Save, and now we're going to try it. And you can see not only is it moving faster, but it's also slowing down a little bit and easing into those endpoints there. And that's thanks to the ease in the transitions. So it still works just fine, but it's pretty wacky. And this is actually a really cool feature that I don't know if you can tell because my timing might be a little off, but it's actually passing on its velocity to my player character. Now you can change that. Let me scooch this over here. If we go check out the player scene and we check out the character body 2D's inspector here, there's actually an option here that'll let us change that. Let me just find it real quick. Down under here, moving platform. So under moving platform, you can set on leave add velocity. If you put this to do nothing, and we save, now here, it won't do that anymore. My jump is the same no matter what. And depending on the kind of game you're making, this may be exactly what you want. In our case, I think I'm going to keep the add velocity on though. I think it's super fun and it might give some interesting ways to get around for the player. Alright, so I turned it back on and saved, and yeah. So you can do some pretty wacky stuff with the faster platforms. I think that's pretty fun, but of course it depends on the kind of game you're making. All right, so back in the area scene, I think what we're going to do now is we're actually going to create more platforms so you can kind of see what you can do with these. And one of the things that you can do here is if we click on this platform that we've already got in the scene, if we go to the curve 2D, we can actually edit this. We can move these points around, of course, but you can actually click anywhere along the line to set a new point, and then you can move that point around. And if you right click, you can remove a point. You can also shift click to rotate a point, which will add a curve to the platform. I'm going to undo that though. And if you control click, you can actually add more points in a path. Like that. You can also, of course, add more points through here by setting up the coordinates. I'm going to undo these. Well, actually, let's try them out. Let's save and see how this platform moves. Now it's going to be pretty quick, so that'll be fun. Let's see. Yeah, there it goes. Wow. I don't even think I can get on it. It's so fast. Oh, wow. Okay. All right, let's slow it down a bit. Let's say 2 seconds for that whole trip and then 2 seconds for the trip back. That should be more doable. Yeah, there it goes. It's still a little quick around that curve, but yeah, it works great. Okay. So then you can go through, of course, and sort of edit these points. Again, you can shift click to rotate them if you want them to be kind of wacky here. This will be interesting right here. Make it a bit of a loop. Let's see how that goes. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Nice. All right. Now I'm going to do another thing here with the points. We're actually going to delete most of these points. I'm just going to right click and I'm going to grab this end point. And what I want to do is I want to basically bring the platform back to the beginning. Now this has a sort of a circular path that loops back around. And so what you would expect would be that the platform would follow the path and then just start over and keep following the path, but that's not what it's going to do right now. What it'll do is it'll go and then it'll go back. And you may want that, that's totally fine. But what we want to do next is we want to have the ability to have a platform that is just kind of on a loop. And that's what we're going to work on next. So back on the moving platform script, what we want is one more variable up here. I'm going to put it right up here. And I'm going to export it so that we can change it on a per platform basis right through the inspector. We're going to call it looping, and we're going to set it to false as the default value. And we're also going to make a few changes in the move tween function. We're going to create a condition here. So we'll say if we are not looping, then we will do what we were doing right here. I'm just going to indent that. And that goes unchanged. Else, if we are looping, I'm just going to copy this because it'll be almost identical. We'll do basically the same thing, but instead of taking the path time to get back to the starting spot, we're going to do it instantaneously. Just to be clear, let's go over the differences in these two lines. So this line that we were using before is moving the platform back to its starting 0.0 spot over a certain amount of time. Here, we're doing the same exact thing, but we're doing it instantly. And that's really all we need to do for that. Now we just need to save. And if we go back and try it in the area, again, we've got this circular path. If we turn this looping on and we hit play, it'll go around, then it'll go back to the start and start over. Now it's still doing the transition where it slows down as it reaches the end and as it starts up. If you don't want that in your looping platform, what you can do is you can change it over to transition linear. And if we restart, we can see that now it's not doing that transition, it's just moving linearly between all the points, and you've got like a sort of perfectly moving looping platform. And that is really about all we have to do to get moving platforms and to go through them. But before we end this video, I think what would be really fun is if we built out this level. So I think what I'm going to do is we're going to just close this out and we're going to put down some platforms and we're going to build out this whole level. to make it something that we can actually go through. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do just to keep things a little bit organized is I'm going to click on area 1. I'm going to add a new 2D node. And I'm just going to call this moving platforms. So we can keep them all in one place. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I will go ahead and just delete this one. And actually, going back to this, what I do want to do is let's go ahead and reset that to 1. And the rest of that is good. And save that scene. Okay, so now we just need to add some platforms. We are going to instantiate some child scenes here. And we definitely need one over here. The player won't be able to jump that gap. And put that there, and then we can move this point to be about there, I think should work. I think that should be pretty good. All right, let's make some more. And let's move it over. This one can be in case the player falls down here. We can have one to help them get out. And then we need another platform that goes over here, one that goes up, and then this one, that'll be a fun one to get going with multiple points and such. So let's see. Let's go ahead and add another platform here. Moving platform. Bring it over here. And let's see. This one we wanted to go across. And then we want another one going up and down. We'll just keep adding more. Here we go. All right, so this one, let's line it up with this one, actually, if we can. So we put it right there, and then we just shift click and move it. It'll align to that axis. And I want this to go up and down. And now, I guess the concern I would have here is that when this one goes over here, what if this one is not at the bottom? So what we're going to do is we're just going to add another platform. Bring it over here. And this one, I'm just going to put it right here. And I'm actually going to just remove this point. So it'll just stay right there and it won't move. So that way the player can hop on and wait for this one to come down. All right, let's do another one right here. There it is, okay. And we'll put it right here to start, and then we'll move these points. One right there, another one like right around there. Straighten it up a little bit. And then another one right there. And a final one right there. I guess this one could scooch to the right a little bit. A little bit more. Doesn't have to be perfect. I just get a little annoyed when the lines aren't straight, assuming I'm wanting them to be straight. Okay, and just for fun, let's create a final platform up here, and this will be kind of like a Ferris wheel that the player will have as a reward for making it this far. Let's move it over here. I don't know if there's a quicker way to move something that you instantiated over to your mouse cursor. That would be really handy. If anybody knows that, let me know. And let's see. So here we want to create, let's create sort of a diamond shape. But we'll probably edit that in a second. Connect these. And then let's put that like down there. And now what we can do is we can shift click these and make them kind of circular. And that's pretty cool. Oops. Didn't shift there. Okay, there we go. All right. And this one, actually we want to turn looping on so that it'll go around. And let's put it on transition linear. All right, and there's our level. That's pretty cool. Let's test it out and see if it works. Here we go. Okay, so can hop up here, and there's that. I just realized I didn't change the timing on that one platform. Oh man, these are going fast. Need to adjust the timing on them, huh? Woo! That's fun. Oh, this one's going to be really fast, yeah. Let's see if I can catch it. Oh, I got it. Wow. Oh no. Oh no. I don't know if I can get back on from here. Whoa. Okay. That's even better than I could have imagined. Great. And here's our reward for making it this far. If I can get on. There we go. All right. Ooh. Okay, I'm not going to end the video right there because it's going to make people dizzy, I think. But yeah, obviously the times on these need to be adjusted, but that's really easy to do. That's why we made that an exposed variable on the inspector. But thanks for sticking it out. This was kind of a longer video, but I really wanted to show the example of using these in an actual level design. And this is really cool functionality, being able to jump through them and having them moving. I really like the way the paths work because you can really draw out your level how you might want. But anyway, I want to give a special thanks to all of my Patreons. I really appreciate your support. It means a lot to me. If you want to become a Patreon or you want to support me on Ko-fi, the link is down in the description. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button, leave a comment on what you want to see next. I've got some plans, but I like hearing feedback on that, so let me know. And subscribe if you want to see more of this. Now, until next time, thank you so much for watching.